Hi again everyone, I'm Marty Wade. You might have seen some of my bits and bobs over on Mart's channel. And in today's video, with help from my friends at Gig Performer, we're going to show you how to optimize your Windows PC for studio and stage. Now I've been using Windows since Windows 95, which technically makes me old, but I'm by no means a Windows expert. Thankfully, Gig Performer has its very own IT wizard, Nemanja, who has written an amazing ebook that you'll find down below. I suggest you go get that now because you're going to need it. And you will also need a cup of tea and a biscuit. So before we even get into Windows, we're going to see if we can alter anything in the BIOS. The two main things that we're going to look at in the BIOS, if there's an option for it, is power management and to disable any hardware that you might not need, like possibly Bluetooth or a webcam, etc. If you look at Nemanja's PDF, there is other options available possibly on your system, like spread spectrum and hyperthreading technology, etc. You can delve into these in your own time. But like I say, I think the two main ones in this chapter are the power management and disabling any hardware. Okay, so I'm going to show you 2 or 3 different BIOSes from the machines I have at home. Don't worry if yours looks completely different to this, it probably will. Just make sure that you have your documentation at hand if you're not sure how to navigate through a BIOS. In this particular BIOS here, I have to navigate with the cursor keys up and down because this is a slightly older machine. But if I head into device configuration, you can see some options here. And if you're not sure what a particular thing means, Google is your friend here. For instance, if you don't know what Intel HT technology means, either look up your manual or look it up on the internet. Intel HT technology is to do with hyperthreading, which Nemanja covers in the PDF. And this is one of the options that may or may not help with your audio setup. So this is one I'm going to take note of for this particular machine. Now, if we head into built-in device options, here we can see a bunch of devices that's in this particular laptop that we may or may not want to turn on or off. Things like the embedded Bluetooth device, you may not want that for stage use. Depending on whether you'll need wireless or not, you could turn the wireless system off completely. There's the fingerprint device, certainly the integrated camera, and definitely the audio device you'll want to disable. And we'll talk about why you'd want to disable the audio device a little later on. Now, this particular BIOS doesn't seem to have any power management options, but fear not, because there's a lot we can do actually when we get into Windows. Okay, what you see on screen now is what's called a UEFI BIOS. Now, they work in basically the same principle as a standard old BIOS, but you have more control. You can use a mouse for a start, which is a great help. It tends to have more information on screen, and they can go a little bit more in depth. It all depends on the motherboard that you have or the laptop that you have. Laptops tend to be a little bit more simple when it comes to BIOSes. This is actually my main studio PC BIOS, and it has a ton of options in it. Again, it all depends on your system and the motherboard that's in your laptop or your desktop. If there's still something you're not sure of, I'm going to go random here and say you don't understand what a PCI Express native power management system is. Have a quick look online first to give you a rough idea of what these things do before you go turning them off and on. Another thing I will say is when you're changing these options on and off, do them one at a time and then boot into Windows to make sure everything's in order. If you go changing a bunch of stuff all at once and for whatever reason Windows doesn't like it, it's going to be harder to figure out which things went wrong. So be quite methodical and try things one at a time. Now, in my BIOS for my studio computer, because it's a desktop and has quite an in-depth BIOS, my power management systems are tied up into the overclocking section here. And as you can see here, all my power saving type of systems are disabled because I want full power available to all the systems on the motherboard and all the peripherals. So a few things that I've already turned off on my machine. As you can see, I've disabled the onboard audio controller. I've disabled my Bluetooth controller because I have no need for that. And I don't use Wi-Fi on my studio computer, so that's turned off. The main reason why you want to try and disable these types of things in the BIOS rather than just wait until you get into Windows is if all these things are turned on and then it boots into Windows, Windows will load the drivers and all the resources that it needs to power these things up and keep them running, which is fine for a day-to-day family computer. But we're trying to get your machine solely dedicated to running audio and MIDI. The last BIOS I'm going to show you is actually from the laptop that I was using on stage for 3 or 4 years. But ironically, the BIOS has very, very few options that I can use to optimize it for what we're talking about in this video. So don't be disheartened at all if you get into your BIOS and you find very few options. There's still a lot that can be done when we head into Windows, and that's where we're going now. Cool, so hopefully you found some stuff in the BIOS that you can change. Did you get your tea, by the way? I got a cup of joe. Get a biscuit, honestly. Right, so now we're back into Windows and we're still in strip down mode, really, trying to delete as much fluff as we can. So the first place to go is the device manager. You probably know how to get there already. What I do, right click on the start button and hit the device manager option there. I've scaled this up on my screen so that you can see a little bit clearer. Okay, so this is my main studio PC. It's fairly organized already, but in the making of this video, I found a couple of things that I should have turned off. So I very rarely use my webcam anymore, but it's still on and using up resource. So it's easy enough to change. You just click on the cameras option there, right click on the webcam and disable device. Simple as that. And then a little arrow comes up to tell you that it's disabled in the list. And another one that I found, which I really should have sorted out a while ago, I must have done a graphics card driver update recently, and the installation must have turned back on the high definition audio section of that driver, which I don't need at all. It's basically used for games and running audio through an HDMI cable to a suitable monitor with speakers, and I don't need that at all. So again, right click, disable. So I'm well chuffed. I didn't need that in there at all. So this is the kind of thing you're looking for. Obvious things initially, webcams, Bluetooth, all the things that I've listed already. Here also, I've forgotten my old printer. I really should do some more housekeeping. This old printer here, I haven't used in like 18 months, yet it's still sitting in the device manager. How bad is that? So for example's sake, I'm just going to disable it here. I will uninstall it properly later on. So in the space of 30 seconds or so, I've freed up a little bit more resource for my computer to work on audio. So that's how we disable hardware in Windows. In the next section, we're going to look at some power management options inside Windows. So let's talk about power management. This is probably one of the most important areas in my view to look at when you're aiming for a stable PC. So Windows by default aims to try and save power. But in this scenario, we don't want to be all eco-warrior and save the dolphins. We want to go full power all the time. Now, if you haven't done so already, go and get that PDF that's down below, because there's some handy little things that we can copy and paste from the PDF to help optimize your system. So go get that now quickly. So the first place to go to is your power plan. Now, there's various ways again to get to this. I tend to right click on my start button and choose power options. Now we've already got some basic options here. Obviously we never want the screen to be turned off. That's not going to be handy during a gig. And we never, ever, ever want the PC to go into sleep mode, ever. Not a good idea. So you've probably set these to never already, but if you haven't, go do that now. And then we want to head to additional power settings. So as you can see from my screen here, I have a few power plan options: balanced, ultimate, high performance, etc. You may only have balanced and maybe the power saver one at the bottom there, depends on your system. So as a basis for what we're trying to do here, and as a bit of a shortcut, I strongly suggest we unlock your power plan options so that you can activate this ultimate performance option right here. And I'm going to show you how you do that right now. Make sure you have that PDF. Okay, so open Nemanya's PDF and scroll down to 4.1. And here you'll see a description of how to activate that ultimate performance power plan. I'll take you through this step by step. It's not a huge deal, so don't worry if you don't understand any of this stuff. I don't understand any of it either. Okay, so what we're going to do is carefully highlight that piece of code and copy it. Now right-click the Start button and choose Windows PowerShell. And all I did there was right-click the mouse button, and that piece of code gets entered into PowerShell. As soon as you hit enter, you will have that ultimate performance power plan ready in your machine. Another option to get into the PowerShell is just to type PowerShell into the run bar and open it that way. You can do it either way. So hopefully when you close that down and go back into your power options, now you'll see ultimate performance as an option for your power plan. Go ahead and choose that and then click change plan settings. Again, you'll get some basic options here. Turn off the display, never, obviously, and never put the computer to sleep. Now, if you click on change advanced power settings, you'll have a list that pops up that you can customize. And we can go through these one at a time to make sure all the settings are in place. In your hard disk, you never want the hard disks to turn off. So set that to never. You don't need to hugely worry about the Internet Explorer one at this point, and you don't have to worry too much about the desktop background settings either. Now check your wireless adapter settings and make sure the power saving mode is set to maximum performance. In the sleep option, we don't want the computer going to sleep ever. So make sure sleep after is set to never. Allow hybrid sleep, turn that to off. Hibernate after, set that to never. And the allow wake timers, I'd also set that to disable. Now let's check your USB settings. These are actually very important because a lot of your gear is going to be hooked up via USB. Make sure the selective suspend setting is set to disabled. We want your USB ports on and active all the time. In your PCI Express option, set the link state power management setting to off. Now in the processor power management section, here's where we can check the actual main CPU. Make sure your minimum cores are set to 100% and the minimum processor state is set to 100% and the maximum processor state is set to 100%. Again, we don't want your display to turn off ever. Just double check that that's set to never. And your multimedia settings, we don't need to worry about too much at this point. So once you've set all those, click apply and OK. So that gives us a really good bedrock for a stable system. All the power is going to all of your peripherals and all of your motherboard components all the time. Now, there are some other options in your device manager. Here's the device manager again. Personally, I would take your time and go through every single one of these to see if there are any power management options inside of these. Now, how to check that is I'm going to choose one just for sake of example. In the Universal Serial Bus Controller section, you can triple check that there's no power management going on in here. So right click, choose properties, and you'll see the power management tab there. What you want to do is make sure that that little box is not switched on. As you can see, that will allow Windows to turn off this device to save power, and we really don't want that. So I would go through every single thing on the list and just right click properties and just make sure if there's any power management options in there to turn that off. So the next thing I would do is turn off your fast startup option, which means basically when you turn Windows off, it doesn't fully switch off and it will leave itself in a very deep hibernated state, which can lead to problems with audio drivers, video drivers, USB drivers, and potentially just give you a... So we're going to head back into the power options. Go back into additional power settings. And instead of all this stuff on the right here, we're going to choose what the power buttons do. Now click on change settings that are currently unavailable and basically untick turn on fast startup and then save changes. That will make sure that your PC fully shuts down each time that you turn off and gives it a chance to fully reboot properly every time you switch it on. Now, there are some other tips in the PDF to do with power management. I suggest that you go through these on your own time. They're a little bit more in depth, and if you really want to get into the minutiae of all that, you go ahead. But what I've talked about just now gives you a good foundation for what we're going on to next. So anyway, what we've looked at so far is mainly to do with hardware. Now we're going to move on to software. So unless you're super organized like I am, you're probably going to have a bunch of programs, etc., installed on your machine that you're not going to need for audio processing. So like what we've done before with hardware, now's the time to strip out all the unnecessary stuff. Again, this will all depend on your system and what you've got in it. Personally, if it was me and it's a completely separate laptop, I might consider reformatting the system drive and putting a brand new fresh copy of Windows in it. That means you're starting from a clean slate. It's just an option. So first place to go is to apps and features. Again, right click on the start button and up at the top, you'll see apps and features. Click on that. Here you'll have the list of all the programs that's installed on your machine. So for instance, on my machine, I definitely don't need films and TV. So you just highlight it and click uninstall. Wait for it to uninstall and it disappears. So continue down the list and weed out all the stuff that you don't need. What's this here? This old thing called Gig Performer 4. Don't know if I need that or not. So while I'm here, I might as well get rid of that printer that you saw earlier. Click uninstall. And once the printer's gone, I can get rid of all the stuff that's related to that. Great, printer's gone. Windows features like the mail and calendar here, you could safely uninstall if you don't need them. Now with certain Microsoft features like Microsoft Photos here, you can see that the uninstall tab is grayed out, but you can still disable it if you go to advanced options and you can see what permissions are connected to the app and you can turn all of these off. Here's one here. I don't need OneNote for Windows 10, so uninstall. More than likely, you'll not need the Xbox game bar, etc. Again, this is grayed out, so click the advanced options and turn everything off. And we'll definitely uninstall Xbox Live, so let's click uninstall. So you get the general gist. You're weeding out stuff that you don't need. If you go to the top of apps and features and click optional features, listed here will be some of Microsoft's apps. I certainly don't need the math recognizer. I don't need Windows Fax and Scan, so that can go. And remember, if you're not sure whether to uninstall any of these or not, either Google them or check that PDF again that's underneath the video. So another thing we can do is control which programs run when Windows starts up. To get there, type Task Manager in the run bar and open that up. Now, if you click the Startup tab, you'll see here which programs actually start when Windows boots up. And you can disable them if you don't want them. As you can see from my screen, I've got quite a few disabled already. I've disabled Cortana and a free download manager that I was using. It was actually running constantly in the background, so I disabled that. I've also disabled Microsoft Edge. So it's another handy little thing to do just to free up as much resources as you can. So now we're going to talk about the task scheduler. It pretty much does what it says on the tin. It schedules tasks. Now, these tasks could be anything from defragging your hard drive to system updates. It could be things like Dropbox checking home to make sure that your folders are all synced up. All manners of different types of tasks. And most of these, ironically, are set to kick off later at night, just when it's gig time. So we don't want any of these kicking off. It will 100% slow your system down and potentially cause a whole melee of trouble. So let's switch all these things off. If we go to the run bar and type task scheduler, and here you'll see on my machine all the tasks that are scheduled. Now, when it comes to gig time, you really want to be turning all these off. This list will be different for your computer to my computer, obviously. Now, I don't even use Dropbox anymore, but look, I've got something running to do with Dropbox there already. I'm not going to need that anymore. So right click and delete. Do I want to delete? Absolutely yes. And for this other Dropbox one here, I'm going to delete that too. Now this is my studio PC, which is connected to the internet. So I do need some of these things. But if it's going to be your gig laptop and it's going to be a little island of its own, I would disable as many tasks as you possibly can. And while we're in this particular area, we definitely don't want any major Windows updates happening, especially at a gig. Head to settings, go to Windows Update. So you've got a couple of options when it comes to Windows updates. You can simply pause them for a week here. Or if you're going to go more hardcore and say you're going on tour, you can actually set this to pause for up to 35 days, which can be handy for you. Now, continuing the theme, it's not just Windows updates. Make sure things like your antivirus isn't updating automatically. Your VSTs aren't calling home and looking for big updates. Windows Defender isn't trying to update. For instance, here's a screen from my antivirus software, and it's set up to check for updates automatically. But I can quickly go into the settings and find the option to let me update them manually. By the way, when it comes to major updates, I think it's just common sense not to do any major Windows updates, major VST updates, audio interface driver updates, things like that right before gig time. If you've got a stable system and everything's running fine, leave it until your gigs are all finished, and then you can go updating things when you've got some spare time, and then you can thoroughly test them out, make sure there's no bugs, etc. So that gives you a few more things to look for. If you want to delve any deeper, Nemanja has written a whole load more on this subject in the PDF, so go browse that at your own leisure with another cup of tea or perchance a brandy, and have fun. Speaking of tea, back in a minute. Chocolate hobnobs, the green beret of biscuits. Are you a dunker? So since this video is all about audio optimization, we really should talk about audio. Now, first thing you need to do is turn off your system sounds. You don't want to be rip-roaring through your show and all of a sudden you're getting...
You've got mail.
No. You can either type in change system sounds into the run bar like that, and you can see it there. Or what I do is right-click on my speaker icon and choose sounds from there. That'll bring up this box. Now in the sound scheme section, you want to choose no sounds and apply that. Super quick and simple, but it will save you a whole lot of embarrassment on stage. Another thing you want to do is disable sticky keys, toggle keys, and filter keys. The main reason for this is if for any chance something like the shift key gets tapped 5 times in a row, Windows will give a beep, and you don't want that going through front of house. So let's turn these off. So pull up the run bar and type make a sound. And here you'll see right here, make a sound when turning sticky keys, toggle keys, or filter keys on or off. Uncheck that box. And you can also untick the show a warning message if you like. And while you're here, turn off the shortcut key for each of these features. There's the one for sticky keys, toggle keys, and filter keys. Now, if you click on change other typing options, just in case you're using a touchscreen, I would uncheck that one there. Play key sounds as I type. So that should sort out all your system sounds. Again, this might be totally obvious, but you don't want to be using your internal sound card and Windows native drivers. It just won't cut it when it comes to what we're doing. You want the best quality audio interface you can buy. And if it was me, I would choose a brand that has a good, strong audio driver. Driver-wise, we're talking about ASIO or ASIO or ACO, whichever the way you want to call it. And it's a highly efficient driver, purely designed for audio hardware and software to talk to each other with really low latency and high speed. Some of the cheaper options when it comes to audio interfaces won't supply their own driver, and they'll ask you to go and get a kind of generic ACO driver. And there's a couple out there. They may well work, but they're obviously designed to cater for a whole range of devices, and you might get some compatibility issues. So if it was, like I say, if it was me, stick to a good high quality name brand audio interface. I just need a little 2-in, 2-out job, and it's USB powered, so I don't have to take a power brick with me. Rock solid drivers, job done. When it comes to your audio interface settings, things like sample rate, bit depth, buffer size, it all comes down to personal preference, power of your machine, and the actual application. So if it's a studio scenario and you need high fidelity recordings, that's going to need a different setup than a live show. The setup that I used on stage with my Windows laptop was a sample rate of 48,000 with a bit depth of just 16, and that let me get my buffer size down to 128. I could get it a little bit lower than that, but if I started using a lot of VSTs, you would start getting a little bit of crackle and things because the computer was just getting a little bit overwhelmed. Again, this might be completely obvious to a lot of you guys, and I apologize, but for a lot of people that just want to plug in all this stuff and play, some of these numbers and things can be a bit head scratchy. So it's a constant journey of setting up and testing and testing and testing and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. So that's a few things to think about audio wise. Are you still with me? Do you need more tea, or are we getting to the beer stage? If so, press pause and I'll be here when you get back. What's your favorite biscuit, by the way? Let me know in the comments. Right, so we're pretty much there. We're going to have a quick look at some graphic settings inside Windows. So go to the run bar and type in View, Advanced System Settings. As soon as you start typing it in, it comes up already, see? And click on that. Here we are. The top box here says Performance, so click Settings. I've got my studio PC set for best appearance because I've got quite a chunky fella with a good graphics card, etc. So these things don't really apply to me. But if you've got a slightly aging laptop with a very basic graphics card system in it and some low RAM, I would choose best performance. That basically unticks all these things here. To be honest, most modern PCs now can handle this kind of stuff really quickly. The modern processors are super quick, but it might be something you want to have a look at. Next thing to maybe look at is your page file. Now, this really, again, only applies to lower spec machines, and it certainly doesn't apply if you've got a nice big SSD drive and, say, 16 gigs of RAM. You don't need to worry about this bit at all. But if you've got maybe a little i3 fella with only 4 gig of RAM and only maybe a half a terabyte mechanical drive, this might be something you want to look at. Incidentally, if you do have a laptop that's low on memory, Gig Performer has a great feature called predictive loading, which helps greatly in dealing with low RAM situations. So just to let you know. So if you want to change your page file settings, go back to your advanced system settings tablet that we had on just a minute ago. Again, go to performance and click settings. Now in the advanced tab, you have your virtual memory box here. This is where we can change the page size. So click change. Now I'm not actually going to change my page size because I have no need, but if you do need to, uncheck that top box. Click on custom size. Now you've got two boxes where it says initial size and maximum size. This depends on the amount of RAM that you have in your laptop. If you've got a 4 gig laptop, first thing you want to do in the initial size is equal that. So type in 4,000 megabytes, and you want to double that for the maximum size. So type in 8,000 and then click set and then OK. Another feature you might get use out of is Ready Boost. I can't actually show you on this machine because it's too quick and has 64 gig of RAM. But head to 7.4 on the PDF. Nemanja tells you all about it. When Windows senses that your system's quiet, it starts going into all sorts of kind of little housekeeping modes. One of which is indexing your hard drives, which basically means faster results for when you're searching things, etc. So again, the main reason to consider this one is if you're all set up at a gig and everything's all sitting idling away, you're backstage having a cup of tea and a toasty, Windows senses everything's went quiet, starts doing all these little housekeeping things and starts indexing your hard drives. Bang, you go on stage and it's like, and it's just another opportunity of things to slow down, etc. So worth a try. So you can do this per hard drive. Open this PC, then right click on the hard drive that you want to change, choose properties. So basically down at the bottom there, uncheck that box and that will stop Windows indexing that hard drive. Might be worth a try. Next little thing is to defrag your hard drives. You probably know how to do this anyway. Type defrag in the run bar. Now, because this is my work studio PC, I actually have this scheduled to defrag weekly. However, on my stage laptop, I have that optimization schedule turned off because you don't want your hard drives obviously defragging in the middle of a show. Now it's just a matter of clicking on drive. If it's an SSD, it will optimize it. And if it's a standard mechanical drive, it will defrag it, but you still click the optimize button. And just a reminder, turn that schedule off for defragging. You don't want anything defragging during a gig. So hopefully you're well on the way now to creating a really stable Windows system for either your studio or your live setup. I've gone over the basics, but there's far more in the ebook PDF that Nemanja has written. So please study that in depth if you really want to get into this. If you're a Windows expert yourself and you know of some more hints and tips, please share it with us and leave them in the comments below. And remember to let me know what your favorite biscuit is. If you're toying with using VSTs and Windows, head over to the Gig Performer website and their forum. Such a lovely bunch of guys and girls that really know what they're talking about and are super helpful. And if you haven't tried Gig Performer yet, get the 14-day free trial. You know it makes sense. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.